This video is going to be about function notation and evaluating functions. So first thing we need to do here is identify which graph is going to be f of x. So we'll have this line be f of x. We'll have this curve, this parabola be g of x. So the first question here, it says, for what values of x are f of x equal to g of x? Well, if I'm looking at these functions and I want to know where they're equal, essentially it means that they're going to have the same y value. So bottom line is here, I'm looking for where these two functions cross. So they cross at the points 2, -2, and they cross at the point 5, 4, and so that's where they're equal. And so the x value that makes that happen are at x values of 2 and of 5. And so explaining what that means, it means that the point where the functions cross is where they're going to be equal because they have equal height at those particular x values. The second question here, it says find f plus g of 1. Remember that this is the same thing as finding f of 1 and adding that to g of 1. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take our input value of 1 and we're going to see where this happens on this graph. I'm going to switch colors here. So at an x value of 1, I come down here to where it meets up with my f of x function, and the value when my x value is 1 of this function is -4. Similarly, I do the same thing for g of x, and it happens to be at 0. And so when I add these things together, I get a -4 for a value of where those, what those two functions are added together at a value of 1. Okay, again, I'm going to label f of x here and g of x. It's the exact same picture, we're just on a new page here. So if f of x equals 2, what values of x determine that output? Well, just one thing to keep in mind here is that f of x equals y. And so x values are inputs and y values are the resulting output. So if I want to know what this output of 2 is, this is a y value. So I'm going to come up here on my graph to a value of 2, and I'm going to go over until I hit the function f of x. And now I'm looking for that x value that it's going to line up with. So that would be right here. And that looks to me like an x value of 4. So that happens when x equals 4. Next question, it says use the graph to state the domain and range of the function. Okay, so domain, first of all, has to do with all possible x values. So that's what it is, and we need the intervals for what that will happen. And so any x values that are possible for g of x here, how I'm going to know this is, and this is what I do, I come over here to an x value that might not be on my graph, and I ask myself, is this x value able to eventually meet up with a point that's going to be way up high here on top of my graph? And yeah, eventually I will get to a point that it'll work. So I know that any x values from -infinity to infinity, because if I did the same thing over here, if I picked an x value that's way over here and I come up, it'll eventually meet up with a y value. So there are no x values that will not work on this graph. Every x value will work. Range then talks about my potential y values. And so for my y values, now I'm looking at how high and low can my graph go? And the very lowest point on this graph is the point we're going to have to estimate here. We'll say -2.25 to, now my graph here is going to keep going forever and ever in both directions on the high end. So it's going to go to infinity. And so there's my range. So the difference between domain and range, domain is talking about x values, range is talking about y values. So that takes care of function notation.